Everyone, I will open the Joint Committee on Implementing Measure 91. We have an information, we're going to open with an informational hearing on cannabis delivery. This issue came up in response to the last bill we had here, and there was an interest in finding out how cannabis could be delivered to people who did not have access to a dispensary in particular. So, Adam, did you want to ask anything, add anything to that, or should we just call her?
No, Madam Co-Chair.
Okay, Veronica Santarelli and C.J. Mobius are here to.
Madam Chair, while they're coming up, I had received an email from Veronica through her organization in the Bay Area, knowing that we had been talking about transfers and delivery. It just seemed like it was an opportunity for us to kind of understand what that type of concept might be and ensuring there's accountability and checks and balances.
Thank you.
So I thank both the co-chairs for allowing us to have a presentation.
Thank you very much, and thanks for reaching out. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Co-Chair, and thank you to the entire committee, Senator Przansky, for allowing us to speak on this issue. For the record, my name is Veronica Santarelli, and I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales for GRASP. This is C.J. Mobius, who is our President and co-founder. We're here today to speak of the need for the committee to put specific language into the statute allowing for home delivery of legal cannabis in Oregon. This is an issue that has been overlooked as a necessity by all legislative bodies implementing rules for recreational states thus far, and it's allowing the black market to thrive for the service in those markets. What we'd like to do today is cite some specific examples of why this is an important issue for the committee to address. We'd like to walk you through a brief deck that highlights the safety our technology creates around home delivery, and then we're happy to answer any questions you might have. To start off, I'd like to just call attention to the folder that I handed out, or that Adam handed out. The first sheet is directly from the OLCC, and it was an update that I received on their recommendations on marijuana policy. I'm sure you've all seen this, but I highlighted number 31 where they are asking for the clarity on this issue. You know, and as we met with everyone from the public listening sessions, and when we attended those, we really saw this as a need and a service that every citizen should have access to. We've spoken with regulators in many states. Some states have very clear rules and regulations around home delivery, and some do not. The states that do not have rules and regulations around home delivery and that have outlawed it are really confused as to how to regulate it and how to create visibility and transparency around this service, and that's what our technology offers. The second document that I have in this folder is just a news article from CBS, and they did a news piece on the pot delivery services that are thriving in Colorado's market, in their black market. And we do think it's really important for the committee to recognize that this is a service that will thrive in the black market if there aren't rules and regulations created around it. And we know that those tax revenues should be going to the state and to services within the communities. So what we'd like to do is walk you through just a brief deck that highlights the safety and transparency that our technology creates. Just as an overview and a brief company description, GRASP is a safe access technology solution built for adults, patients, regulators, and licensed service providers, and is meant to provide connectivity, insights, and accountability across all parties from order to point of sale.
And Madam Co-Chair and members of the committee, my name is C.J. Mobius. I'm the president and co-founder of GRASP. Very humbled and honored to be here today, so thank you. Moving back to the company description, our goal is to empower regulators, licensed dispensaries, and policymakers with insights, data, digital tools, and infrastructure necessary to ensure continuous improvements in the standards of recreational cannabis across the state, in addition to providing a means of transparency for you all. You know, our executive team is very well traveled. You know, we've surveyed markets across multiple states, multiple cities, and through that due diligence process have discovered a number of growing industry problems from a cannabis delivery perspective. One being there's no guided path, meaning patients or licensed users do not have a proper means from a digital perspective to acquire and understand the path to obtain medicine and or product. There's a lack of safe access solutions, meaning there is no statewide technology platform at the recreational level that's been recognized for purposes of delivery. There's a lack of monitoring tools that promote accountability, meaning there is no checks and balances, and there is no means to understand customer service and to regulate users through a platform of this nature. There are no real-time tracking and reporting of daily operations or quality standards. And lastly, there's antiquated technology systems, meaning right now, through the black market and through other markets that are accepting this type of platform, you're finding, phone, text messaging. There's siloed ways to disseminate the information, and a lot of things are fragmented at this point in time and reliant on older, antiquated technology systems. Just a kind of a brief background before I get into how we solve these problems and the solution that we offered. We'll take a step back to why we did it. We are all executives from a myriad of different verticals, being from aerospace to health and wellness to finance to entertainment and technology. The CEO and founder, David Johnson, and myself particularly, come from a rich background in technology. So we worked with big brands like Toyota, MGM, Zappos, Adidas right here in Portland, or an hour away. And we saw the emergence of data and the power of technology, the power of innovation, and the need to consolidate a number of different technology channels onto one platform to offer higher yield and efficiency for our clients and really to drive better results across a system. And that really comes down to just the power of technology. And so after seeing trends in other industries, we took a look at this industry and really wanted to create infrastructure because of the lack of support that it had, and really to build out something that streamlined a better process and more connectivity for everyone involved. So with that said, here's some of the benefits of GRASP. GRASP is a single regulated safe access platform that addresses the needs of everyone, from new patient or new license entrant to dispensary holder to doctor to compliance manager. GRASP is a regulated access. GRASP offers regulated access to licensed professionals and doctors. It is a secure and trusted environment with quality assurance for licensed dispensary providers. There's digital ID and patient verification with accountability and data management on a secure HIPAA-compliant server. And we also are in accordance with all PII, which is called personally identifiable information for our patients or licensed users. GRASP is an on-demand communications technology for the regulated request of legal cannabis. And GRASP is a unified platform for real-time tracking and reporting of daily operations across all parties. And I'll walk you through just a brief example of how this is executed. So if you look up on the screen below is a chart, and it's a little wordy, but I'll walk you through one example. So in this case, in the case of being in California and operating in California or other states that offer a medical marijuana program, patients have to have a doctor's recommendation. So we would have our membership services team verify that that patient did indeed have a doctor's rec. In the case of Oregon, they would have to have a valid state ID and be above the age of 21, I believe. Once they gain access to our platform, they then have the opportunity to order medical cannabis through a series of of touch points, which are streamlined and make it very easy for that patient or user to obtain that cannabis through a guided path. That order request goes out to a network of licensed service providers who have a corresponding back-end technology that receive the order in real time. That order is cross-checked with the inventory that they've pre-uploaded to that system, and the service provider would then accept that order based upon the algorithm and distance they are away from that user. Within the back-end system that we built for the service providers, they then have the opportunity to navigate to that user and then collect the documents or information necessary to complete the transaction. So what we've done is we saw, all this fragmentation that existed in order to complete the transaction. We cleaned it up and we put it in one place, which really streamlined and created more efficiencies for everyone involved. These service providers and drivers for the dispensary are trained on best practices and standard operating procedures necessary to complete a valid transaction. They're trained with high-level, areas of customer service and do have the opportunity to report should there be any non-payment issues, a fake user, a security concern. We've also built in corresponding digital touch points for them to alert our operations and membership services team to report on a user should they be causing any harm or acting out of line. And then once that service provider connects with the user at the point of sale, they go through a system of checks and balances in order to process the order. That order is complete, and then they're back on the network, presumably trying to obtain more orders to create more efficiency.
Are you, we're running a little short of time. We would count it on 15 minutes. Are you?
Sure, we're almost done.
And we want to make sure we have time for questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
My apologies. So lastly, what we want to offer, regulators and policymakers and compliance managers is the opportunity to report on and really to drive insights and data back to you to obtain more understanding of what's happening from a delivery perspective, to gain insight on average order sizes, to feedback on drivers, to whatever information that we're able to capture on our platform. We'd like to drive that back to you to showcase more transparency into the system.
And the last slide really just refers back to the Cole Memorandum. We feel our technology specifically solves for 3 of the most important guidelines: preventing drug driving. Obviously we've been working in a medical market so far, but in a recreational market, you will have adults that shouldn't be driving and that would need access to a service like this. Preventing revenue from sale of marijuana going to criminal enterprises, gangs, and drug cartels. Again, the black market will exist in markets where the service is not allowed, so this is a way to prevent that. And then preventing the distribution of marijuana to minors. The way that we have the checks and balances system within our technology is we capture their identification so that we're able to verify and have that checks and balances system in place. So there's a lot of real-time accountability built within the technology that provides safety for your communities. And the last thing I just want to call your attention to in the folder is, there's a lot of areas and states that do allow for delivery. Vermont, we feel, is a great statute. They have great rules and regulations created around delivery. So from example one is taken straight from their statute. If you look at Section B, a dispensary may deliver marijuana to a registered patient or registered caregiver. The marijuana shall be transported in a locked container. And then what I did under example 2 is just added some additional language that could be used in a statute in Oregon with consideration to technology innovations and recreational programs, because we do feel that if you are going to implement delivery, there should be technology to create that safety. So I just added some next to B. A dispensary may deliver marijuana to adults over the age of 21, a registered patient or registered caregiver. The marijuana shall be transported in a locked container, and delivery technology is required for safety and visibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a very interesting presentation. Are there questions from the committee? Representative Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Thank you for the presentation. It's fascinating. I might have missed some. I have 2 questions. Okay. Are you currently operating in another state?
Yeah, yes, Representative Buckley, we are actually launching in San Diego County June 1st. So
June 1st,
that is
okay.
when we will, I guess, break ground. Our approach to finding licensed dispensaries is first working with city officials or regulators at the state level to have them push us to valid licensed dispensaries of that city or state who are operating in accordance with safe access regulations.
And my follow-up is, does your company basically just sell the technology, or are you involved in all parts of this?
It's a great question. We offer a technology package as well as then logistics services and support, but we do not work. We work with the dispensary and we deploy the technology on behalf of the dispensary, would help with hiring drivers, training drivers on technology, and then to support the dispensary and the actual ecosystem of patients or users with GRASP, the technology. So we are simply a technology service with logistics support.
We provide standard operating procedures, best practices, that kind of thing.
And if I just real quick follow?
Please.
So your contract then is with the dispensary?
Yes.
And not with the state agency, but with the dispensary, and that's how you envision it?
Correct. And I guess the point is we offer then the ability to drive insights and reporting and data back to the state in the form of, clean reports, customized reports with whatever you guys would like to see at that level.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Lanier.
Thank you. Where do you envision that the drivers come from? Is it like an Uber or Lyft sourcing of drivers, or is it a fleet of designated drivers who only drive transactions like this? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, great question, Representative. We have a number of strategies in terms of hiring quality people. We do like to source drivers who have experience on on-demand platforms, like your Ubers or Lyfts. But it's really just identifying, quality people who are trusted and who can be trained on best practices and standard operating procedures in order to, fulfill the requested product. So there is no rhyme or reason. I mean, we like to think that we're trying to hire quality people and pay them at a certain level, or at least suggest that the dispensary pay them at a certain level in order to efficiently transact.
And of course, they go through all the appropriate background checks and that kind of thing.
Correct.
Other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. And
Thank you so much, Co-Chair.
The OLCC is in the audience here, and I'm sure
Oh.
they're paying close attention as well.
Great.
Great.
Thank you for
Thank you
so
all very much.
Appreciate it.
Madam Chair?
Senator Brzezinski.
Just in conclusion, the reason I thought this was important is because I did meet with a group of dispensary operators in Lane County about 3 weeks ago. They made it very clear that they feel that they are, quote-unquote, disadvantaged by the black market because people are actually doing this service that we've heard about through the black market. And the goal I think we would have is to ensure that it would be connected to the dispensary and giving an opportunity of having that checks and balances in place, and that would allow for the dispensaries to actually be able to service the community and again diverting out from away from the black market.
Great, thank you. And I think the news article they gave us from Colorado goes into that issue and how
Yes.
it relates.
And also, Co-Chair, thank you for hearing us out. We're happy to act as advisors. As the OLCC is looking to form those rules and regulations, Vermont has a really great program that they've written very clear stipulations around how delivery should be run. And it seems like that's a really great template, and we're happy to provide additional information as far as what would be important as far as like rules and regulations around it.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming
you.
all this way to.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for hearing us.
All right, we will close the informational hearing on cannabis delivery, and we will open a work session on House Bill 3400. And we have two panels tonight. This is state agency night to react to the -1 amendments to House Bill 3400. So our first panel will be Lauren Henderson from Oregon Department of Agriculture, Catherine Daniels from DLCD, and Deanna Mack from the Department of Revenue.
Sure.
No, see, there she is.
You guys making side deals again? Good afternoon, Co-Chair Burdick and Co-Chair Leininger. It's a pleasure to be here again. For the record, my name is Lauren Henderson. I am with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I wanted to kind of set the stage for you with my colleagues here with me, and then you will hear from OLCC, I believe, last. And, of course, we'll all stay in case you have follow-up questions to any of those. But we're here today and appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've seen in the 3400-1 document and how that relates to our various programs. I think we're here to be an informational source for you today. I think you may hear of some coordination issues, some clarification points, some just basic informational points, and then, of course, maybe some technical fixes that we have identified. I want to assure you that the agencies together are working very closely together. As a matter of fact, ODA, the Oregon Health Authority, and OLCC have been talking quite frequently on the phone and have an established meeting set for Friday to talk through some implementation things. Our goal, of course, is to help you and to try to implement as best as we can your desires in implementing marijuana and the recreational side into Oregon and into our various programs. For my part, today, I wanted to bring up really what seems like a minor but could be a very important issue, and that is the 3400-1 amendment defines cannabinoid edible as food. And because it does, it places it directly into our current food statutes that we have in our state. The Oregon Department of Agriculture is responsible for the distribution and processing of food. The Oregon Health Authority does primarily restaurants. We do everything else in our department. Grocery stores are the most common one. And because it places it in there, we've identified a couple of places that might be a challenge in the placement there. The bottom line is people, if they're going to produce a food edible, we need to have Oregon Department of Agriculture food license. Our food statute, though, which is primarily in ORS 616, has a place in there that talks about adulteration. And we believe it would be very beneficial to make it clear to everyone who might read those statutes that marijuana is not, for the purposes of our food safety and sanitation pieces, an adulterant. We've talked, and I think I was before this committee very early on, several months ago, with Lisa Hansen, our deputy director. We talked a little bit about our food safety program and how we envision integrating that with either OHA or OLCC as they're defined in 34-1. But in simple terms, ODA would be responsible for the sanitation issues related to those edibles. OLCC or OHA, as you've defined in 34-1, would maintain the packaging and labeling requirements. That currently falls to ODA today for all other food. They would maintain responsibility for the testing of those things. And then ODA could not regulate marijuana as a food additive the way it is currently in the food statute today. And so really, Shannon O'Fallon, who I know you know very well, we're very well connected to her, and she's helping us try to figure out what is the best way to insert the edibles, food, into the current food structure that we have in our state today, and at the same time meet the goals of what's in 3400-1. And so with that, I'll stop there and be able to answer any questions, or we'll pass it on to my colleagues.
Thank you. I think we'll hear the panel, and then we'll go for questions.
Co-Chair Burdick and Co-Chair Lininger. My name is Catherine Daniels. I'm the Farm and Forest Land Specialist for the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and thank you for the opportunity to provide information to you here today. DLCD administers the statute and rules that govern land use approvals and exclusive farm use and mixed farm forest zones that have to do with uses that are in conjunction with the production, processing, and sale of farm products. We have had a chance to review House Bill 3400-1 amendments, and we including the land use section, about just a few pages long, and have some comments to make. We have provided some written testimony with more detailed comments, but I'll just give you a general overview here today. The section on land use addresses dwellings in conjunction with farm use, as well as processing facilities, and also the potential for farm product sales. Section 2 calls primary dwellings in conjunction with the marijuana crop out and prohibits that use in an exclusive farm use zone. We assume that by primary dwelling, the committee means primary farm dwelling, which would be good to clarify because there are several different kinds of dwellings allowed in exclusive farm use zones. We also assume that that particular type of dwelling is intended to be prohibited because it could lead, if it were otherwise allowed, there could be a proliferation of such dwellings because there is an income test that is the basis, one of the bases for farm dwelling approvals. And so potentially with no limits, because of the high value of marijuana crops, you could potentially get a lot of primary farm dwellings on very small parcels. However, we didn't know if the committee was aware that there is another pathway to farm dwelling approvals in EFU zones, and that's through very large lots. In other words, if you have a parcel that's 160 acres of farmland or 320 acres of rangeland, that's another route to the approval of a farm dwelling. As the language is currently written, that would foreclose that option, and we weren't sure if the committee meant to foreclose that option of a farm dwelling in conjunction with marijuana on a very large property. So that could be rectified through the inclusion of a few words that clarified that, if that's what you would like to do. Also, we noticed that there is no treatment in here of accessory farm dwellings. Those are that's your farm worker housing. Could be individual homes or duplexes or multifamily housing, but those are also subject to the income test, the same income test as the farm dwellings. So we would suggest that you might want to treat them in the same manner that you do the primary farm dwellings. So moving from dwellings to processing, there are currently 3 paths in exclusive farm use zones to processing farm products. One of them I would characterize as accommodating your larger scale farm processing, and one is more of a mid-scale route, and then there's your home-based home occupations that could potentially be used for farm processing. The way the Dash 1 amendments are written, there's an allowance for 2 of those 3 routes, and we didn't know if you had intentionally omitted the 3rd route or not. Currently, you're allowing the large-scale route and the home-based route, both of which would involve a conditional use review at the county level. The conditional use review would allow counties to utilize their own review criteria if they choose to. The route that's not included here is a route that would allow the use on an outright basis, would not allow the county to use its own review criteria. So we didn't know if that was the reason it was left out, because you want counties to be able to introduce their own review criteria, or if it was just an inadvertent omission. So we're not making any suggestions for changes there. We just wanted to bring that to your attention. Then there's also a provision in the rule that requires, or in the amendments rather, that require a land use compatibility statement from a city or county that would tell the OLCC whether a particular use is a land use that's allowable in a particular zone. We would suggest that that level of information is not a guarantee that the actual use will be approved given land use approval, and that it might be preferable to actually have the Lux statement ask the city or county whether the proposed use has actually gotten land use approval. Otherwise, the OLCC could find itself in the position of granting approval, a license, and charging an applicant a healthy amount of money, and have the applicant subsequently find out that they can't get land use approval. So it would just be an adjustment to the Lux process. And then, we notice that there's no treatment of actual potential sales venues within the farm zone. Currently, under current law, if there were no changes made, we would interpret farm stands and commercial activities in conjunction with farm use to potentially be places where marijuana and marijuana products could be sold. We do have some concerns with the potential proliferation of farm stands and even commercial activities in conjunction with farm use, because currently there are no, first of all, counties don't ask what crop is going to be grown, and the farmer can sell not only the crop that he grows, but crop on any other farm in Oregon or adjacent farms in adjacent states, so there'd be no limit on the amount of marijuana that could be sold. Plus, potentially a farm stand could be devoted solely to the sale of marijuana. There are no limits in that regard. And then the farm stand provisions allow a landowner to sell other incidental products or promotional activities that contribute up to 25% of the gross sales of the farm stand sales. So given the high value of marijuana, potentially a lot of non-farm related incidental products could be sold at farm stands and at commercial activities in conjunction with farm use. Also, promotional activities could potentially be large. And so if the committee has any concerns with these areas, these two potential uses, DLCD would like to request authorization in statute to do rulemaking and to be given a period of 2 years to do that, within which time OLCC would not be granting permits or licenses for those two types of uses. Finally, we do have Measure 49 and Measure 56 to be concerned with. Measure 49 prohibits new regulations that would limit residential uses of property in resource zones without compensation by local governments. So we think that if the committee is going to limit dwellings in conjunction with farm use, that you might want to invoke a notwithstanding clause for that. Measure 56 prohibits new limits on previously allowed uses without individual notification of every landowner in that zone throughout the state, which can be quite costly. That could apply to both any changes in the dwellings and also potentially other uses such as farm stands and commercial activities in conjunction with farm use. I know that's a lot of detail, and I've written it up in the written testimony I provided, but I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. We'll finish the panel, but thank you for all the work you put in on this. Welcome, Deanna.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Co-Chair Leininger and Burdick. For the record, Deanna Mack, Department of Revenue, and we're here because the Dash 1 amendments shift Section 69 through 90, shift the collection of the tax from OLCC at the point of harvest essentially to the point of sale at a retail location, and ask the DOR to do that task. We do have some minor technical issues with the bill that we would work with Legislative Counsel on, such as the administration, audit, collection of tax, if it's unpaid, due dates, filing rules, those kinds of things. We'd like to align them with what we currently do in our current processes, so it's pretty standard. I won't go into a lot of detail on that, but just alert you to that. One of the things I did want to alert you to, and many of you already know this, but right now Department of Revenue is going through a major core system IT replacement project. We're in our second rollout of 4. We are currently converting our personal income tax program, and it would be, we're having an expected rollout date in December of 2015. Our withholding tax program is a $5 billion a year program. Will roll out in 2016 into 2017. And we just wanted to let you know that that the timeline that the OLCC has set forth in their proposal of when they will issue licenses for retail locations works very well with for us to be able to implement if we were to do this. October of 2016 is the first, given our other project and IT resources, that we'd be able to do that at the retail level, and so it does work well for us. We are collaborating with OLCC to look at other options. We did just learn that the inventory tracking systems that they are working with for the seed to sale tracking, I think you guys are calling it, they have some options for tax collection within those systems. So we're still exploring that, because that might be an efficient way to accomplish your end goal here. But we're still exploring other options at DOR to manage that and implement what you put into place. But bottom line, we're willing to work with you and the OLCC to get this put in place if you need to. But we do like that October 2016 timeline. So with that, if you have any questions, I know there's been some question about the 911 program and how that we are implementing that program, and because it is a point of sale tax collected by retailers, 75-cent per month tax on prepaid cell phones. There is no such thing as, I guess you could call, a point of sale system. What we have is just an increase in the number of returns that are going to be filed by different people that are going to be submitting the tax, the current 75-cent tax. So our current base went from 200 people, and as of October of 2015, because we haven't implemented that yet, we're expecting it to go up to, I think, around 4,000 retailers. But again, that's just a return that's going to be filed. There's no system for that, per se. So with that, if you have any questions, keep my comments brief.
Questions from the committee? I'll ask you, Deanna. We talked earlier in the day, and your assessment was not too encouraging in terms of trying to figure out a temporary way to feed marijuana into the medical dispensary system for recreational use, which Senator Ferrioli and Senator Przansky and others have been working on. Can you kind of give us an idea of why that won't work, and maybe what other solutions might be?
Madam Co-Chair, and to your question, I went back to staff this morning after we spoke, and I did brainstorm some solutions related to whether we would be able to accept the cash, which has been, as you know, one of the biggest obstacles for the agencies, and put something in place by October 1 of 2015. And we do think that we can do something like that that's that's highly manual. My understanding is that there's a little more than 200 dispensaries in Oregon, and most of them, or a good half of them, are in the Portland area. So we think that we can service them probably at a location in Salem here on a temporary basis that would maybe include a lockbox or drop box that we manually, like old school, going back to manually sending receipts after the fact. They deposit the cash in a lockbox, and we send them a receipt in the mail until we get an interim system in place, because we couldn't bring up an IT system. My understanding is that even to secure the premises, it's going to take 3 to 4 months just to get contractors in to secure a place for the deposits to be made, other than our existing lockbox that we have. So that would be the most efficient way right now at a really high level that we're exploring.
Great. Well, I'm encouraged to hear that, because we would really like to figure out a way to get marijuana to people legally when they're legally able to have it. And obviously the tax piece is part of that. Are there other questions from the committee?
I have a question.
Senator Ferrioli.
So if an individual needs to make payments today, don't they do that electronically?
Madam Co-Chair and Senator Ferrioli, payments are accepted electronically by the department for the income tax programs, assuming that the person has a bank account and they have a debit card or a credit card in order to make that payment electronically. Okay. And
Madam Chair, is there any difficulty with accepting payments from marijuana businesses?
Madam Co-Chair, Senator Ferrioli As far as I know, my understanding is that the issue is that the marijuana businesses don't have bank accounts or have some struggle with bank accounts. This is what we're learning from Washington and Colorado, that they have something around the lines of 30 or 40% of the money is cash because they don't have bank accounts. And so those that do have bank accounts are under some other pretense of not being like a regular business would be able to be. That's my understanding. I'm just coming up to speed on this, so I apologize. But that is one of the things that we're struggling with, how to handle the payments that these folks want to make to us. And we think we have a solution. We're working with with U.S. Bank and the Treasury Department to handle the cash, because that's the biggest component. If they have a credit card or a debit card or a check, they already have a bank account and they can make the payment. That isn't an issue. It's the handling of the cash.
Representative Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Question for DLCD. Thank you for all the information. Just to clarify, when you're talking about the farm stand use, in your testimony, you said that if we wish to prohibit or restrict such sales, you're asking for 2 years to complete the rulemaking process. Is that true? If we make a decision to simply prohibit, you would still have to do a rulemaking process to carry out a prohibition of farm stand sales of marijuana?
Madam Co-Chairs, Representative Buckley, if the legislature chooses to prohibit the use, then no, we don't need to do any rulemaking.
If I could follow up, not to prohibit the use of marijuana, but to prohibit the farm stand sales of marijuana, because it sounded like your testimony was saying you were going to ask OLCC to not issue growing licenses to people growing in farmland because they had the right to sell, and you needed 2 years to write the rules for it. I'm just trying to clarify that.
The sales.
Right. So if we prohibited sales from licensed grow sites, wouldn't that simply solve the problem right there and not require rulemaking from your department?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Buckley. I could see OLCC cringing back there as we had this farm stand discussion. Senator Przansky.
I'd like to follow up on what Representative Buckley asked. His question seemed to be limiting or prohibiting, I should say, sale of marijuana from a farm. What I thought I also heard was that the farm stands just in general can sell other products from other farms and stuff like that. So we would want to basically exclude any type of sales, not just the marijuana sales at these farm stands, because then it seems like you're going to have another large group, a potential large group of new stands to be monitoring. I just want to make certain we close the loops and don't open up another box that's going to take rulemaking, et cetera.
Madam Co-Chair, Senator Przansky, the farm stand provisions in statute and rule have long allowed raw and processed farm products to be able to be to come from other farms, not just the on-site farm.
Right.
So I'm not sure.
So just the question I thought I heard Representative Buckley was asking about not allowing for sales of marijuana from these farm stands, but it seems to me it needs to be broader than just the sale of marijuana. It would be the sale of any type of farm products from those locations.
Senator Przansky, what are you getting at? What are you?
I just want to make certain as to if we were going to do rules that say that we're going to need to prohibit, we need to prohibit all types of sales from those properties that are growing marijuana that are farms, and so that you wouldn't allow for beef or other type of farm products, milk or whatever, apples or whatever being sold there. I'm just trying to grasp what I thought the testimony was. It was broader than just the marijuana itself that's being grown at that location.
Peaches on the counter, marijuana.
Well, again, the provision has been in effect for many years, probably 20 years or so, that has traditionally allowed not just farm products to be sold from the subject farm, but from other farms throughout Oregon and in adjacent counties in adjacent states.
I guess what I'm having trouble understanding is why you're worried about having other non-marijuana things sold at a farm stand. I mean, I can't see a situation where a grower would want to sell butter and berries from their stand. But I guess I'm trying to get at what your concern is.
I just want to make, because I've heard something about rulemaking need to be done if we allow this, and it seems to me that I would just want to ensure that if they are going to be selling other products that are not marijuana related, that we're not going to get hung up, that we need new rules adopted for that. But what I guess I'm hearing is that if you have an existing farm, they already have the right for the last 20 years to be selling farm products. We just would have to just exclude the sale of marijuana or marijuana products, cannabis, from there to not keep, or to keep any additional rulemaking to be required.
That's correct, if that's what you choose to do.
Okay.
That's what I thought too. Long way around. Senator Cruz.
Yeah, for the record, I'm not going to be selling at my farm stand, so.
We definitely want to have Cruz jams.
We do, yes.
All farm stands.
And Madam Chair, not so much a question, although you can respond, Department of Ag, but kind of a comment, and it's on inspections. And one of the frustrations I've had in my time in this building is how many different agencies do very, very similar inspections. Okay, and there seems to be a lot of duplication. And if one of our goals here is to limit the number of agencies involved in this program to keep the costs down, it's something we should consider. And I use my farm stand as an example. The Department of Ag inspects my kitchen. Okay, and we bake pies and cookies and all that sort of stuff. Connected to my market, we have a thing, it's called the Dog House. He sells hot dogs. It's inspected by the health department. Okay, the same building, 2 inspections. And another interesting part of that is because he's under the health department and we're in the Department of Ag, he can't use the dishwasher in my kitchen to wash his stuff, okay, because it's cross-jurisdictional. I mean, you know, some of this stuff's really insane, okay? I guess the point I'm making, and it's no disrespect to the Department of Ag, they do a wonderful job, but all the other inspections we're talking about are happening through the health department. And my question is, should we consider, and I know it falls under the jurisdiction of the Department of Ag, unless we change that. So it's just something I think we ought to consider. If we're trying to do one-stop shopping for a lot of stuff here, maybe the inspections all should be in the same place as well. Just something I want to put on the table.
Thank you. Representative Hill.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. And Catherine, thank you for all your work. It's coincident with some other thinking that folks had done, and now there are amendments to the land use section that were probably just posted today. And if I could ask you to have a look at those when you have a chance, I'd appreciate your thoughts on those as well. I think we can solve the farm stand thing pretty easily. When we were drafting those provisions, the way Measure 91 is written, I made the assumption that all the marijuana products would be sold through a dispensary and that the dispensaries would likely be in commercial storefronts, not ever be in an unsecured location at a farm stand. So now that this has come up, I'm reading the measure again and I can't validate my assumption. So I think we can solve the problem by going through a simpler revision process, and I'd be happy to volunteer to work with Mark Mayer on that. But Catherine, what we got here, I would really like your insights on how we can treat marijuana growing and processing uniformly in the other zones that allow agricultural activities. And you know that we have both mixed farm and forest use zones, and we have some zones that are left over from almost before the program that are multiple use agriculture or some sort of county agricultural zones. How do you see the sideboards we're putting on the treatment of marijuana in EFU zones affecting those other zones, and including maybe even rural residential, which, as you know, virtually all of those zones allow agricultural use as well as a permitted use.
Madam Co-Chairs, Representative Helm, that's a really good question. And I have to say that I'm, as the Farm and Forest Land Specialist, I deal pretty much exclusively with the farm and forest zones, which have specifically permitted uses in statute and rule, and no other uses are allowed. And of course, all other zones, counties and cities are free to allow whatever uses they choose. And they may well come up with other types of processing facilities that don't necessarily fit the three types that I just described that are applicable in farm zones. Even in a forest zones would only allow one of those three paths right now, just the home-based processing. So there is no mechanism that would assure consistency among the different zones with respect to processing right now.
Thank you.
Representative Leininger.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mack, so much for your work on this. It's interesting, and I can see how it's challenging with the other projects that you're trying to implement with Department of Revenue. Could you speak to the idea we were talking about earlier this morning of potentially, if there were an early start in October 2015, for example, folks could just hold off for 12 months on remitting the tax revenue, just like a lot of households do, pay annually or make their final reconciliation at the end of 12 months. Is that a path also, or
Co-Chair Burdick and Co-Chair Leininger, when I went back to the office after we talked about that this morning, there was a very broad consensus that we would not want to have people hold on to that amount of cash. My understanding is that I think the OLCC has, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, has estimated that there'll be about $400,000 a month when it goes full of cash to handle, and with a 20% increase month over month is what I think the experience was in Washington. So we don't think that anyone's really going to want to hold on to that much cash for that long of a period. So we came up with a drop box to allow for deposits, literally old school, put a deposit in an envelope and then we send a check later, or a receipt, proof of payment, open it double custody, count for it very manually. We think we could actually probably get an account set up for the person in our system, but we're still exploring that. But it would be very high level. We wouldn't be able to give you any kind of data or statistics or anything like that, but we would be able to bank the money and do it periodically rather than wait for them to hold on to that much cash and deliver it to us all at once.
Please follow.
So the thing that I think that the Dropbox idea is a good, interesting idea. I'm not sure how much comfort people take in putting a huge amount of cash into an envelope and dropping it in a box, as opposed to keeping it in a safety deposit box. But I defer to you as the expert. But what I would say is, right now these businesses are dealing with the problem of how to deal with really significant amounts of cash anyway, and the fact that they, under a new scenario, would be remitting some of that as tax payment as opposed to not remitting it. I'm not sure it changes the thing they've gotten used to, the uncomfortable thing they've gotten used to, which is probably making use of safety deposit boxes. So as we consider the viability of an early start, I'm pleased that you're thinking through a whole range of options, and I encourage you to continue. Thank you.
We will.
We don't really know how many dispensaries would want to participate in this, but would it be beneficial? Would it be helpful in terms of tax collection if we had some kind of provision that you couldn't have more than a certain amount in a certain area? In other words, would fewer storefronts make your job easier, or does it matter in a place like Portland?
Madam Co-Chair, I think that we haven't really explored that yet, but we do think that we would probably do something along the lines of what Washington's doing, requiring appointments, and they're requiring them to bring the cash to Olympia, which is quite a bit further away from Seattle than it is, Portland is to Salem. So we think it would be okay for an interim solution to probably ask the few that choose to opt into this to bring it to Salem by appointment or make arrangements somehow so that they can get it to us during the day as an interim solution if they don't want to use the drop box, if that makes sense.
No, please.
Maybe we could have the GRASP drivers doing shuttle service. I'm kidding.
They already left the room.
Other questions?
Co-Chair Burdick, if I could, just real quick. Senator Przansky brought up something that whether you meant to or not, I think is important that I had in my notes that I didn't mention. And it's not just related to food, I don't think. This committee should kind of think about or have in the back of their head commingled activities, multiple activities on the same place. I'll go back to the food example, a regular bakery brownie versus, and the other, and can they do that in the same facility? And likewise on the farm stand, that issue came up. It is out there, I think, at multiple levels on this, and certainly if you have thoughts on that, I think the agencies would like to know what those are or not. And then just lastly, Adam has our contact information, and certainly feel free to get a hold of any of us at any time.
Thank you. And we really appreciate all the work you put into this so far. More to be continued. I'm very interested in some of the land use issues that you raised. We want to make sure that we're not compromising our agricultural areas with this unique crop. All right, thank you. Okay, next panel is OLCC. Rob Patrick and Steve Marks. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Burdick, Co-Chair Leininger, members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's nice to be back working on the implementation of 91. We're excited to start moving forward with you to accomplish that goal for the citizens of the state. You've been quite busy. We've been busy in the meantime. We've done a lot of work to advance the seed-to-sale system, to develop the online licensing system. We advanced our budget and Ways and Means on marijuana, and are now in process as well of initiating the public information campaign on what's legal under the personal use requirements. That's progressing. I believe the contractors will be actually interviewing some of you to get input on that process. Notably, we appointed the Rules Advisory Committee, 2 permanent committees to OLCC, one on licensing, compliance, and enforcement, another one on labs to help us ensure traceability in the lab system. We also have appointed a number of advisory groups on the license types. And then in addition to the license types, we actually have 2 on processing, one on processing edibles, topicals, and infused products, and then one specifically on extracts. The wholesale licensing technical advisory committee is not yet appointed. We weren't quite sure how that was going to be used. We're going to take a little more time to announce that and put that together to look at how it works, operates, and what its privileges are. We had anticipated advancing a business group to look at the overall costs that we're putting on the system and our rules, but also to look at those issues that we don't control that are related to the business of marijuana, how you get insurance, how you get workers' comp, how do you deal with those issues as well. Vince Porter in the governor's office is helping us coordinate with Treasury on the banking, both the tax collection and banking issues, and what I also call getting the cash out of the system issues that are in front of us. So we would be yet appointing a business advisory group. The banking and finance structure, we're going to work in coordination with Treasury and the Governor's office on that process. And then last, when we advanced this, we were talking about advertising and labeling requirements in the groups. Of course, we'd be coordinating with OHA depending on what our responsibilities are here across the board. So we've appointed some 70 people. They will hold over 50 public meetings between now and September to this comprised group. And I would note that there will be some slight adjustments. There is no Eastern Oregon member to the RAC, and we will be appointing an Eastern Oregon member to the RAC. With that, I'd like to say that we've been continuing our outreach and work with the industry, constituencies around this, and we have extended some from our listening process to discussions with Southern Oregon growers and the industry itself to try to advance the information and the policies you have in front of you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Rob Patridge if you don't have any questions.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Co-chairs and members of the committee, for the record, I'm Rob Patridge. I'm the chair of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission. In our continuing effort to try and create some transparency in the process and engage the public and the interest groups related to what's happening in the state as we move towards developing a recreational marijuana system in the state, as you know, we held listening tours around the state and listened to thousands of Oregonians related to what their interests are and how they wanted us to attune a system that would work for them. In an effort to continue to do that, as we've worked with this committee, as we've appointed the RAC, we also engaged an ad hoc group of individuals representing various parts of the industry. We've had over 30 hours worth of meetings over the course of the last 3 weeks related to working with 3400 and previously Senate Bill 844 and the -1 amendments. We have tried to work comprehensively together to come up with a goal of having a comprehensive set of amendments with OLCC involved in those related to some recommendations to this committee. We've tried to keep some of you individually apprised as well. And today we have joining us today at the dais Anthony Johnson, who's a member of that group, Jeff Sugarman, Jonathan Manton, and Nikki Terzioff, who are all here today, who were asked as part of that group that we've been meeting with to come forward. There were about, we've also met with the broader group of the marijuana-related lobby as well related to this, but we wanted to.
We can play musical chairs.
Yeah, we can come up. But in an effort to do that, we've tried to work very collaboratively with the industry to come up with a set of rules that will work to put recreational marijuana in place to make sure that patients continue to have access on the medical side. But one of the big things we heard at OLCC as we traveled the state was that there was a lot of interest in somebody being able to go to one place to sell, that they could get medical marijuana or recreational marijuana. So we have tried to work with the industry in and around that. And what you have up on the screen before you, and I believe that you have as a PDF piece of paper that's in front of you, is a group effort in principle to come to some kind of solution where we could track and continue to keep under the principles of the Cole Memorandum within the OLCC system the ability to sell marijuana at an OLCC licensed retailer at both a medical and a recreational side. And what was important, and I think it's important to continue to preserve that grower-patient relationship, is what we were hearing, and some of the early concerns were that that there was going to be the medical marijuana market could get messed up. What we've tried to do in the example that we give above is give the medicinal growers an opportunity to opt into the recreational or OLCC side of the system. They would opt in with their existing grower cards. They would be the sole source provider for medicinal marijuana on the OLCC side of things. So the red line there would be everything to the left of the red line would be under the OLCC seed to sale tracking system. So what would happen would be on the bottom we have the medicinal grower and their patient relationship. They could opt into the OLCC system and be under the seed to sale tracking system. So they'd be under the seed to sale tracking system, but they would be limited to the amount of marijuana cards that whatever system this legislative body decides is going to be on the medicinal marijuana side, it would be limited to that number of plants. So, for example, if they had 48 plants that they could grow on the medicinal marijuana system, they could only grow 48 plants, for example, in the seed to sale tracking system. They would be able to grow those. They would be able to grow those plants. They could give them back to their patients. They could give product back to the patients that they were the card holders for directly, just like they do today. It would be, but it would continue to be tracked in the seed to sale tracking system. In addition to that, they could go ahead and send those to an OLCC licensed lab, wholesaler, processor, or a retail licensee, and those then a medical marijuana patient could go into a retailer that's licensed by OLCC, that's seed to sale tracked, and be able to pick up their medical marijuana at a discounted rate. In addition to that, what we heard continuously from growers and others was that there is excess medical marijuana in the system, and that the growers would like the ability to sell that into the retail market. This allows them the best of both worlds, to be able to sell into the retail market their excess, or they could sell back to a medical marijuana dispensary on the dispensary side. But this allows the seed to sale tracking system. We believe this is in the principles of the Cole Memorandum. It would allow marijuana growers to have their interest. We're continuing to work through the details. You know, there's some specific details related to pieces and parts of this, but in principle, I think this group before us, this was a collaborative effort that people have come on board and been able to work together on, which we think is good. We've also provided the committee a list on a memo dated May 26th from the Measure 91 industry group meeting. Those are a list of many of the items that we're continuing to work on, and that group is continuing to work on together in collaboration. It's a group of about 9 people who've continued to work on this, that we have about 30 hours in, and then we've been bringing people in on various other pieces and parts. So we're not only continuing to work with that group, but our goal is that we're going to continue to. Our goal would be for this committee to allow us and to tell Legislative Council to work with OLCC and this group to draft a comprehensive set of amendments that we can then present to the committee that we believe would be a consensus group of amendments. There are obviously some things that OLCC doesn't, you all get to make those final decisions, but it would certainly be recommendations related to OLCC and this group for your consideration sometime in the next week. We're ready and poised to engage in that, in addition to working with our partners at Department of Ag and Department of Revenue and other things, and the Oregon Health Authority to continue to work under those. But we're committed to do that, and we would appreciate your support in doing that. And I'll let the other group members who we've been working with talk. So, Anthony, you want to?
Madam Chairs, members of the committee, Anthony Johnson, Chief Petitioner, Measure 91, and the New Approach Oregon Committee and the Measure 91 campaign, wanting to treat marijuana substantially similar to beer and wine, and treat it similar how we do in this state, while also taking in the concerns of, really the federal government, the Cole Memo, patients, processors, producers, retailers. Went all into the process of drafting Measure 91. The 3400-1 amendments are a great start, and I think very much in the spirit of that. And the work of the OLCC on bringing people together for a consensus furthers that, in my opinion. And it's really good to have everybody come to the table. The opt-in, the voluntary opt-in, I think provides an avenue for medical marijuana patients, growers, processors to really have the best of both worlds, but not squeeze anybody out. And it's taken a lot of input, negotiations amongst various sectors of this industry to come to this agreement in principle. So I hope we can see that implemented. And additionally, on the recommendations put out by the group, I think that really everything that's been handed you today really is in line with Measure 91 and really brings us together in the spirit of the will of the voters and bringing us out of the unregulated system into a regulated system. In that mind, I would like to illustrate the residency requirement and making sure that we have transparency, background checks at all the investors, but make sure that mom and pops can get the capital that they need. And then in taxation, about moving it to the retail level, I think is fine with the spirit of 91, but that we need to keep the tax rate as low as possible to make sure that the regulated system can cut out the underground illicit system. So I'm in complete agreement with the fact that we all have come together and got a consensus on most of the issues, and some of the issues I'm sure will come forward, but I really thank everyone's work on this issue, and thank you for your time, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
We'll continue with the panel and then go to questions.
Madam Chairs, members of the committee, Jeff Sugarman representing the Oregon Cannabis PAC. We're a group of growers, processors, edible makers, and dispensary owners who are very much interested in being part of the new system. I want to thank the OLCC for bringing us together over the last couple of weeks to discuss some of these issues. It's been really helpful. We've reached agreement on a lot of issues. On many others, we're very close to final resolution and are anxious to get that finished and bring those to you for your approval as well. Those are the issues, though, the ones that are close to final resolution that I want to talk about today a little bit. One of the most important, I think, is the issue of edibles and the delay that is currently in House Bill 3400. As we talk through that issue, the edible producers that we represent and some of the other industry folks, I think, have convinced the OLCC that they are ready with packaging, labeling, and whatever dosage requirements are necessary to be able to move forward without delay on the edible side. We have a number of those folks who will be on the Rules Advisory Committee or the Technical Committee of the edibles testing, and they are ready to go, and they are ready to be participants in this. And so I think we've reached general agreement that the delay for edibles is not necessary. I do want to dive off a little bit and talk just for a second about some testimony last week and how it relates to some of the issues that we're actually trying to solve. There was testimony last week that said Oregon is producing enough marijuana to serve the entire state, and indeed I think the medical marijuana patients in 4 or 5 other states. I've had an email exchange with Dr. Crawford over the last week, and I want to just point out to the committee that his research only covered the flower and the bud, or the actual sale of those in those markets. It did not include the sale of concentrates or edibles and the product necessary to create those products. So I think that's really important as we look at 3400-1. There's language in there that allows for the setting of canopy size limits or acreage or plant limits for outdoor growers. I do want to point out that about 50% of the Colorado market is composed of concentrates and edibles, and at least 30% of any Oregon shop that I'm familiar with are selling that amount, at least that amount of concentrates and edibles. And I also want to mention that we had 10 processors at our twice monthly PAC meeting today, and 8 of them said that they are looking for product to process every single day. So there is still a need out there, and even with all the product that we have here in Oregon today. So I think it's important that we ensure a stable and consistent supply that meets all the needs of the marketplace as we go through this process. So how do we do that? As I mentioned, there's language in 3400 that allows the setting of production limits on indoor and outdoor grows. That conversation, I think, should be based on flowering, canopy size, or a corresponding plant limit or acreage that allows for a generally equal yield annually between the indoor and the outdoor growers. Why flowering canopy? At all of these facilities, they're going to need offices and curing rooms and storage rooms and trimming rooms and potentially other activities that are going to take up a large amount of space. Setting the flowering canopy size has a direct relationship to the amount of product that we're producing, and that's what we should be looking at as we look at setting those limits. We've recommended a 10,000 square foot flowering indoor canopy, and have been in discussion with the outdoor growers, both that are members of our PAC and other groups that are out there, to see what that level should look like for outdoor so that we can produce that similar annual yield. I think we need a lot more discussion on this issue to determine the right level of production that supplies but does not overwhelm the marketplace. The committee could, if it chose to, adopt broad sideboards of this discussion and allow the OLCC to set those limits by rules. If the desire is to set that limit first, we do again recommend a canopy size of 10,000 square foot indoor and a corresponding outdoor size that allows for a similar annual yield. I think this also helps us in discussion about the issue that Anthony Johnson mentioned with residency. Setting production size limits, at least for growers and processors, will probably keep out those who seek to overwhelm the market with product grown in 50,000 or 100,000 square foot grows. There's strong agreement in our PAC and the majority of people, I think, in our OLCC working group for allowing outside investment, but ensuring that the investor is not a criminal enterprise or a gang or a cartel through the use of a criminal background check. That's the standard that's set in the Cole Memo. You can't allow the revenue to go to criminal enterprises, gangs, or cartels. It does not talk about investors, whether it's my brother from Ohio or a major investor group from some other states. For retail outlets, if we're looking at how we should deal with that issue, by adopting the Colorado model, which allows the medical facilities to opt in first, we could ensure the smooth entry into retail markets for existing medical dispensaries who want to move forward into the retail and possibly the retail/medical market. So that would ensure, I think, both of those options would ensure that Oregonians would form the cornerstone of this emerging market, and I think that would also meet the confines or the strictures put forward by the Cole Memo. And just one final note, the Oregon Cannabis PAC does support the efforts to allow the sale of clones or starts and flowers to the retail market on October 1st, and we do anything we can to help facilitate that process. And I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Manton, testifying here on behalf of the Oregon Sun-Grown Growers Guild. And I'll just be very, very brief because I just wanted to say thank you to Director Marks as well as Chair Patridge for taking the time and effort to convene this group. I think it's been very much in good faith, and I think we're coming to a lot of agreement. They were able to even come down to Southern Oregon and spend about 3 hours just in a restaurant meeting many of the growers that I represent, many of the same growers that many of you have had a chance to meet, and airing some of these conversations out. It's been very productive. I'm going down there tomorrow to take a lot of this conversation to them and to continue our talks to formulate more bullet point responses. I actually received just an email about 10 minutes ago. We've been working feverishly to go through both 3400-1 as well as kind of the proposals that are laid out here by OLCC. And we have a response already in draft form now. We're talking it over as a board probably tomorrow. And so what I'm hoping we could do is I'd be able to follow up with you saying maybe by close of business Friday, I think we can have our line-by-line response to here's the things that we really agree on, which I think is most of the conversation that we brought before you today, along with some things that aren't included that we would like to see, and some things that that we probably still are not at full agreement on, and that way you can choose which policy directions to move forward on. But I just wanted to be here to ask for that window of opportunity to still be open so that we can go down there tomorrow. I'll be down there tomorrow night, present to our membership group, and then we can come back with our formal responses and just say thanks for all the work that's gone into this so far.
Thanks, Chair Burdick, Chair Leininger, members of the committee. Nikki Terzieff here on behalf of the Oregon Cannabis Business Council, and allow me just to say kumbaya. This has been a tremendous experience, really. Lots of hours, as the chair had mentioned, and with Director Marks and these folks and others. I think it's heartening, and I think it's something, and I hope it's something that you all see in something of the same lens. And this product here that's in front of you, these 3 pages, certainly have been worked on and worked out and reworked. And I think you do have a very solid product here, and it's a great starting point for one comprehensive conversation. It's also, I think, as the gentleman before me have mentioned, a good starting point for a couple of comprehensive conversations that are yet to be resolved. And when those items are tackled, if we can do it, I maybe would echo Mr. Manton's request for just a few more days. We might be able to get there. We may be close on a lot of these things, and if we can continue this work together and continue the collaboration, we may be able to put some of those issues to rest as well. I'll just echo real quickly, concern over residency requirements, of course. We're interested in making sure that Oregon has the head start, Oregon business has the chance, whatever model that looks like. There's various ways to go about it, and I'm sure we'll all be happy to talk with you ad nauseum in your offices. So one of the other pieces would be the tax structure. Just looking at singular tax rate. And I'm going to quickly get out of my lane here in talking about it, and I'm sure that you'll have plenty of other experts to address the issue. But that's one piece that I think we all felt pretty strongly about for the ease of implementation. Other than that, just...
would you elaborate on that?
Sure. Yeah, there's in 3400, in the dash ones, there's several blank lines for tax rates based on the product or type of product. And I think that general consensus was that that's a confusing and probably an approach that's maybe not going to get us to where we want to go as far as...
So you're advocating a single
rate. Yes. See, I look for consensus now. So I guess I would just be very brief and say thank you, and thanks to you all, and certainly thanks to OLCC. This has been a really great breakthrough for the conversation for implementing recreational marijuana.
Yeah, I can't remember. I should know this, but are you all members of the RAC? Or you're on the committees?
No.
You're on the RAC, right, Anthony?
Correct. And we are not.
So you were just picked at random out of a parade, right? Questions?
Yeah.
Senator Brzezinski.
Ooh, okay. I don't know if this is going to be for the advocates or if it's going to be for OLCC. It's working off of the diagram. So I guess the first question would be, if you had a new medical marijuana grower, when they came into the system, would they come in the status quo, which would be on the right-hand side of that panel, or?
I have questions for this panel.
Okay. Oh, yeah. We'll come back to that. Why don't we do the panel first?
That's so close.
Let's just do the panel first.
Okay.
It's good to see the enthusiasm, Madam Chair.
Panel questions, and then we'll do musical chairs. Did you have a question, Senator?
I did. I'm trying to get these dates right. October 1st for clone starts and flowers.
I think that Chairs Leininger and Burdick, Senator Ferrioli, I think that was the proposal. That was the most recent proposal I had heard was the October 1st date. We're interested in it whenever we can get the system in place to be able to start doing that.
And Madam Chair, just to follow up, we've discussed a soft start July 1st. Is there any further discussion among the industry group about making some product available the day it's legal for Oregonians to purchase?
Madam Co-Chairs, members of the committee, from the perspective of the Oregon Cannabis Business Council, we're ready to roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Just on that issue.
Ready to roll literally, I think, would be
Someone picked up on it.
I'm sorry, I couldn't
Given my
resist
long
that one.
history of defending the rights of city councils and county commissioners, I did understand that part of the proposal of starting sales would be that there'd be some sort of communication from cities and counties where that would be something that they would want their dispensaries to do. So I just think that's part of the discussion. Part of this concern I have is in July 1st, which I'd love to be able to do, but I think the onus would be on us to enter into communication very, very quickly with cities and counties to get their reaction to that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Other questions for the panel, and then we'll do musical chairs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Come on back for Senator Brzezinski's question.
Questions?
Questions?
So just working off the schematic as to how that would work, if you had a new medical grower coming into the system, once this would be up, what is their entry points? Is it more than one?
More than one.
Would they start on the right-hand side as a traditional status quo, or would they be able to start over on the seed to cell tracking?
We'd contemplated that, I believe, on the right-hand side, that they would start on the right-hand side and elect to have somebody be their grower. I don't see, we could probably streamline that system at some point in time to figure that out. I don't, as a new card holder, I don't see why there shouldn't be a problem, though.
Okay, so then regarding current medical growers, looking at the bottom of the schematic, looking at the green box that's on the right-hand side, you have the arrow that says opt-in. So under this proposal, those who want to go under seed to cell would be able to go from the right over to the left into the opt-in OLCC medical licensee?
Correct.
All right, and then once they are there, the arrow that kind of comes off the right back into the green would be their ability to get it to the dispensary, and you've already said that they would be giving patient direct access to their medicine.
Correct.
So the bottom arrow that's on the bottom says growers registered patients only OLCC tracked.
Correct.
Is that group?
That would be that directly to their patients who are the registered card holders for that patient.
Okay. So my concern, Madam Chair, through this process is ensuring that those who are in the medical program are not going to be overran by large new commercial type of grows that would be on the right-hand side. And my understanding from looking at this, that would not be possible because you'd have, those people will be the grower licensees, supply retail only, that are coming in another. So they don't come from the medical grow program and opt in, and they start to come in once we have recreational sales. They would be under the seed to cell tracking, and their distribution would be limited to the retail outlets.
Correct.
Yes. Thank you.
But the retail, medical, and recreation, that's what the chart is, and that.
I understand that would be a possibility, but the dispensaries themselves would still be able to still coexist.
Correct.
Under the OHA.
The medical-only dispensaries.
That's correct.
Correct. I guess one of the questions I had with the people who opt in to the medical into the medical dispensaries with retail that want to do both. Would the patient would their medical patients still own the marijuana legally?
I think that they would have the right to that marijuana. Yes.
So basically, they would have to be served first.
We would want to make sure that the patients got their medicine, got the amount of medicine that they needed.
Representative Buckley.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. The OLCC's come into for some criticism from this committee and others during this process. This is good work. This is very good. And I greatly appreciate the effort that you made to bring people together to get to a system that does, it looks to me like you are very, very seriously taking into account the needs of patients and access. You've done what we were trying to do from the start of this, is come up with a process that would be beneficial for all concerned as this new industry takes place. And I greatly appreciate the fact that you put this effort in, brought these people together, gotten some agreement. I know there's still a lot of loose ends to tie up in it, but this is what I hoped we would get to. And very good work, gentlemen.
Thank you. Well, we want to this committee's been great. I think we want to recognize Anthony Taylor, who's here, who's been there at all those meetings as well. They had a group, and then Lisa Nato is in the back, who's been super actively involved. I don't want to miss anybody who's been super involved in it.
And the one
Amy was involved in a few early on through the phone call.
So
the phone.
I would hope that the patient advocates also weigh in on this. I know you have advocates in the room, obviously, but I hope patients themselves, when they're aware of this, will let us know their any questions or concerns they have on this as well.
Thank you. Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess it could be for Rob or Steve, one of you guys. Yeah, and again, thanks. This is good. I'm looking at page 3, or actually page 2. No, actually, I'll start on the first page. And these are kind of combined questions. Seed to sale tracking is the first question I have for you for preventing substitution and tampering. Do you see kind of, as you're crafting this, and where OHA is wanting to go with this as well, from what your model is up here, trying to develop some consistent policy between the two?
And Chair Steve Marks, for the record. Yes, Representative Olson, we do want to gain consistency between our approach, obviously, and the committee's well aware there's cost to implementation here across systems. I'm sure Representative Buckley is going to keep us online in terms of paring down the cost where it makes sense and making sure we meet your will by being funded on both sides for those separate things that we need to do as well. But
okay,
yes,
so just a follow-up.
answer that question, Jason.
Okay, thanks. And then on the second page, under packaging and labeling, it's kind of a follow-up of that. But again, looking also under the dash ones for packaging and labeling for 3400, I see where you're wanting to have the authority for packaging and labeling for recreational products, but also it also indicates through this work here, OHA sets broad standards by date, include language on pre-approval of labels and fee. So again, that appears to me that you're wanting to really have to work closely together to have consistency.
Representative Olson, absolutely true, and that's an area where we want to spend some time working with the ad hoc group plus OHA. I think we're getting close to an understanding of what general standards mean and who's doing what part of labeling, and particularly who should do the consistency with packaging, which we have a strong interest in because of the traceability system. So.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Something we talked about a long time ago, but we haven't addressed since, and that is, do we have anyone monitoring the relationship between the medicinal grower and the patient? Some months ago, when I was in district, I was talking to a patient who was saying that their relationship had not gone well with their grower and they really had nowhere to turn. I wanted to ask, have we rectified that at all in the process?
I would, for the record, Rob Patridge, Chair of the Commission. We've heard similar stories as we've been out on the road. I think that there was some patient rights bills that have been running around related to those particular things. We've been trying to be very careful as OLCC not to mess in that, because we've been criticized for messing on the medical side, and so, but anecdotally, we have certainly heard some of those same things. It would certainly be nice to make sure that the patients do have access to their medicine if they're the card holders and they're the people who are actually doing it. So that's certainly something we can look at as we continue to work collaboratively as a group, if the committee wants us to do that.
Well, but that would, did you have a follow-up?
No.
That would be another advantage of, for people who opt in to this system where they can sell recreationally or medically. Once you license somebody, you can have requirements on them. In the case of people who are participating in the medical program, you could actually accomplish some of this protection of the patients by license. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I just want to add that OHA would still be responsible, right? We'd be tracking to a patient number, a card. They would be responsible for the patient end of the system because that's where they get the card from.
Well, I guess what I was trying to get at is making sure that, I mean, obviously, the patient owns the marijuana, and they have rights to that. But if you're also licensing them, it seems to be an extra protection available for the patient, that they get what they need before the grower is able to make any kind of profit off of the marijuana.
Yes, Madam Co-Chair, thank you. I just want to make sure we do make some progress and we pay attention to that.
Thank you. Chair Leininger.
Thanks. I agree with what Representative Buckley said. This is really exciting work, and I'm interested in hearing what the patients have to say about it because, they voiced a lot of input at other times. But if patient groups feel like this model works for them, I think that it provides some nice access, and it also enables those small businesses that a lot of us care about to have an entree into the recreational market in a way that doesn't implicate, residency requirements or keep anyone else out, but rather helping have a warm handoff to this new opportunity. One thing it does raise in my mind is the issue of communities deciding not to have legal marijuana. So if we do have different standards, the one that the voters approved for Measure 91 and the one that was recently adopted in Senate Bill 964, what would happen, in your opinion, if a city council decided that they didn't want to have medical marijuana? Would the person who had opted in have to remove their medical stuff from the store that would be there anyway because medical's not allowed? Or how do you see that playing out?
I think our preliminary discussions as part of this ad hoc group would be that there would be basically kind of three opt-out provisions. So, and whatever those levels are, I know this committee has debated ad nauseum related to that. But you could opt out of the medical, as if that bill passes as it went across the Senate today. You could opt out on the OLCC retail license, or you could opt out on the OLCC medical side. So there would be three separate opt-out opportunities. So community could choose what their community wants to look like. That's what we've talked about, at least preliminarily. We haven't, nailed that particular piece down, and we certainly have not touched the third rail of marijuana politics in this building about what the opt-out provision really looks like, one way or the other.
Other questions from the committee?
Same question, Madam Chair.
What question?
July 1st, 2015. Talking amongst yourselves. July 1st, 2015. That is the date that the program will make possession and use legal. Where are we at with the potential soft start in medical dispensaries for recreational marijuana?
Madam Co-Chair and Senator Ferrielli, we don't have any authority to create any kind of soft start system. We're certainly waiting for legislative direction for you to do that. In addition to that, even if you needed to do that, it would, I think it probably falls outside compliance of the Cole Memorandum. And in addition to that, the Oregon Health Authority would have to create a whole different set of rules than they currently have. So they'd have to put a whole set of temporary rules in place if that's what you directed them to do related to entry into the, OLCC, we can't even go in, we don't even go into those dispensaries unless we're invited by OHA and accompanied by somebody from OHA. That's how strict the rules are. So all those types of rules and procedures would have to be adopted as well. So we have not done anything related to any kind of soft start provision at OLCC. We have our time has been consumed with trying to create a holistic system that will work for the long term. And that's where we have spent our time and resource, frankly.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Follow up, please.
So can you give me the date by which recreational outlets will be up and available?
Madam Co-Chairs and Senator Ferrielli, I can't. I'm frankly waiting on a lot of direction from this body as to what our rulemaking process is going to be like, who's going to be in charge of labs, testing, and a variety of other things that we have to create rules for. So once we know that, we certainly can help you. As we've said before, it continues to be our intention to create something in the later half of 2016 for retail operation to be up and running. I think that a proposal like this, though, creates an opportunity to get product to market in a faster manner because we have this opt-in provision. So you could look at this maybe as part of a compromise position to move the retail market hopefully a little faster than that, because we would be bringing in existing growers.
And one more follow-up. If there is no legal outlet, but Oregonians will have a legal right July 1st, and we are looking at sometime in the latter half of 2016, isn't that a direct contribution to incentivize the black market? If you don't have outlets, retail outlets up and running July 1st, and we haven't created a rule by which the medical side can make a soft start available through medical marijuana clinics, then what we're really saying to Oregonians is keep accessing your black market supplier until sometime in the latter half of 2016. Or do you see the paradox differently than I do?
Co-chairs and Senator Farrelly, we didn't create Measure 91 and we didn't write it, neither did you. So it certainly continues to, people will have the ability to grow and do their home grow piece, and OLCC has no part in regulating that, nor is interested in regulating those home grow provisions and seeking those out. So it's certainly, they can legally obtain it through their home grow provisions, and I think that's, I don't know what the intent of the drafters were, but on the contrary, you could move that date back too. So it's certainly, you have certain options as a legislator. You could move that date back to the same date that OLCC comes into play, but I don't think that you would do that politically or otherwise. So I don't think it's up to the OLCC to do that. We are focused on creating a system that complies with the direction we've been given by the federal government, and looking for direction from this committee, and working collaboratively with our partners in local government and in the industry to create a system that works long-term for Oregonians.
I'm stuck with the same paradox that we started with. If we accept Measure 91 as the law, and also accept the constraints of the Cole Memorandum, which requires us to do, I think, everything we can think of to prevent leakage into the black market, then I believe that Mr. Patridge is absolutely right. It isn't the OLCC's responsibility. We did not create the opportunity in our considerations of the medical marijuana package that we passed out. It is our responsibility to make sure we are not providing an incentive for that last great marijuana grow of the season to enter the black market, which by some estimates are in the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So, Madam Chair, I think the testimony I heard puts the responsibility squarely where it belongs on this dais.
Yes,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Wilson.
Thanks, Madam Co-Chair. The public is confused about Measure 91, and they have reason to be at this point in time. My question would be about outreach. Is there a planned outreach to the public as we reach some point in time along this particular track?
So I'm Co-Chair Steve Marks, for the record, Director of OLCC. Representative Wilson, there is a planned outreach on trying to define for Oregonians what's legal, what's not, the limited ways marijuana is legal for the state of Oregon. We have done a contract with Metropolitan Events, who's in the stages of planning how we would roll out that campaign. The dollars are modest, $350,000, but I think we're going to be able to do some benefit to all of us, particularly if we all use our resources to help communicate this in this campaign packages itself in such a way that you as legislators can avail yourselves of the collateral from it to be able to communicate with constituents as well. So I think we will have outreach. It will give the basics on what's legal, what's not legal, and of course we know there's some trepidation because we got a little bit of flux in the law still right now, but we're moving forward with what we know based on 91. We hope to be able to roll it out on time, and right now we are on schedule. They were out interviewing, I think, a few legislators to make sure that the characterizations of the campaign meet a wide variety of tastes. And we're going to ride in a very narrow lane on communicating not values about the system, but trying to communicate about just what it is that will keep you out of trouble, put you in trouble, and what you're allowed to do by legalization.
Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Both of these questions deal with enforcement. So my first question, and it was asked of me, do you see you moving forward with some type of a leniency for enforcement initially, maybe for the first 6 months, something like that, to get everybody get caught up to where you're at?
I mean, co-chairs and Representative Olson, I think we've said since the beginning that OLCC's first responsibility, we believe, is to educate. And that's what we try and do on the alcohol side, and we try and imbue that within the culture of what OLCC is about, and we will continue to do that as part of the marijuana piece. So we're going to continue to educate. If you want to call that leniency or whatever, I mean, we're going to continue to educate. But it's progressive discipline when we deal with licensees, and that's how we do things, and that's how we go about doing it. So I think that, to answer your question, that's the plan, is to continue to educate. Obviously, if it's blatant and and it's deliberate, we will pull the trigger and we will try and do those things appropriately.
Okay.
If I may, I'd like to follow on this, Representative Olson. One of the things that we've talked about in terms of our implementation now is we're going to implement the marijuana program across our structure of OLCC. So we're going to integrate it across the current OLCC programs. One of the things we learned in our outreach from Washington, what they're doing and working with licensees, is there's a real differentiation between what you do on retail, where we're concerned about minor access and some of those things, and what you do when you're working with, producers and processors and other licensees. They have a different inspector and a different regime of inspections to work with those that are in the production and growing of marijuana. And we think that that's going to be a beneficial model for us. It can put us in the right spot, I think, to be able to work, as Rob said, collaboratively and with the education focus that we have. I would say that in the early stages of this process, because we're going to be putting in place new systems, both for our inspectors and for those licensees, that there's going to be some experience of training and how much product goes where. Did you have the tags on right? Some notion of safe harbor. OSHA uses that. A lot of agencies use that. We use that in water quality protection standards, and I think that something like that, particularly in the first year, to get this set up right and to make sure that people can comply with what we put in place is going to be really important.
Very good. And just to follow up now for the enforcement side, and Rob, you can probably speak to this more than I can, but I'm concerned about the nuisance issues, whether the response for enforcement comes from you or from local agencies. And I think, I don't think that this was an intended consequence by any means. It's kind of what's happened with 3460, with dispensaries models, as well as the grows, where due to what we've done with RAC, with security as well as with cameras, that type of thing, you've had folks that are in the nearby area, neighbors, that type of thing. They're really concerned now because of they themselves feeling like their privacy has been invaded. What's your thoughts on that, and how do we address that? Because that does seem to be a major concern. I bet every one of us have heard something like that.
Mm-hmm. Co-chairs and Representative Olson, we deal with that obviously on the alcohol side on a regular basis, and probably the bigger example of that is, maybe not at we don't have the same kind of grow problems and those kinds of things that we could experience here. But on the retail side, we work collaboratively with local government to try and resolve the issues together. Some of the nuisance issues, when we look at locating somewhere, we look at the nuisance issues and the criminality and the things that are going on, because we don't want to continue to dilapidate the neighborhood. While at the same time, from an enforcement standpoint, we try and make sure that it's enforced, that we don't have malingerers hanging out in the parking lot, going in the liquor store, and then taking liquor out to their car and drinking and bringing down the neighborhood. Those are the kinds of things that we'll continue to work collaboratively with local government on to make sure that we can try and deal with the nuisance issues in a proper manner. We try and, we've talked collaboratively with the group the ad hoc group that we've been meeting with, about the ability to, use cameras as an ameliorative effort in terms of trying to, if there's a problem location, to try and do that rather than close it down so they can monitor what goes on outside their business or the nuisance. So there's a variety of tools that we try and use to make those things work, and we'll try and do those things.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Cruz.
Yeah, just cautionary for your outreach or ad campaign. I hope you aren't using the same vendor that was used for Cover Oregon.
Okay, Senator Cruz, you are shut down now. Other questions? Representative Leininger.
Thank you. On the ad campaign, I know we had talked earlier this session as a group and possibly with you about the need for prevention education for young people, and the allocation of funding that you got was $350,000. I know that Colorado had quite a bit more money and did a really exhaustive or a really thorough youth outreach campaign to help make sure kids get the message that marijuana is legal, but it's not legal for them or for them at all. Where do you see your role in being able to send that message with the money you have? What would you like to see us do in terms of supporting prevention education?
Co-Chair and Representative Leininger, I would look 2 chairs to your left. I think that there are some substantial issues related to where we're going to fund things and how that's going to happen. We had not asked for anything in our budget related to the educational piece. We are happy as a commission to take on some of those things, and our commissioners are poised and ready to do that. But I think that as you struggle with the budgets that you're faced with here in the legislature and the funding, I think it's an issue that we are happy to engage in, and whether all that money that is allocated per the formula to OHA is going to be used for that or not, I think is a substantial question for Ways and Means in this body to wrestle with overall. We're happy to engage in that, would be happy to engage in a work group to do those kinds of prevention efforts, but we currently had not currently hadn't forecasted any money in our budget piece, and I know that we're doing our alcohol budget tomorrow.
Yes.
And then I think we've bifurcated the alcohol budget and the marijuana budget at this point in time because we're waiting to figure out exactly what responsibilities we have.
Yeah, just one thought. We're running out of time,
Right.
so I want to make sure everybody gets their questions in.
The thing that I think I've heard loud and clear from Colorado and from parents in my district is that a crucial aspect of us moving forward with legal marijuana in the state is going to be making sure that we have an outreach campaign for youth to send the message hard that it's not something for youth. So I hope that we're all going to focus on what we heard from Mr. Patridge just now about the fact that they don't feel like they're funded to, or in fact have the mission to do that outreach, because we need to make sure someone is doing that.
I vote for radio.
All right. Are there any final parting questions? All right. Thank you very much. It was
Thank you.
very helpful. Thank you for all your work on this, and thank you for the ad hoc committee.
Thanks.
Committee, Representative Leininger, do you have anything to say about the next meeting? Do we know?
You know,
what it
I
is?
think unfortunately, since you were ill for a few days, we haven't had the chance to talk about that. But I am really hopeful that by the next meeting we will have a revised draft of 3400 that includes information from a lot of these conversations that people can respond to. And you know, in the ideal world, we would try to work a bill next week. But in any event, it would be good for us to have a revised set of amendments that people can respond to next week, so we can try to work the bill very soon, since time is running out.
Right, and I've asked OLCC to feel free to work with Legislative Council under my auspices to get amendments that you feel are appropriate based on your conversations with your ad hoc group. and the same with the Department of Revenue to try to get this on the fast track. So, with that, Senator Prsansky.
There was one question or statement that was made by the ad hoc group regarding potentially having just a single rate across the board. I'd like to have more discussion about that because some of us have talked about having a tier thing depending on what the product is as to added value versus usable marijuana.
Yeah, that's a good discussion point. Okay, committee, thank you for your work. We are adjourned.